What's up, everybody, and welcome in to another edition of the Sit Down. As always, if you enjoy this video, please make sure you hit that like button and let me know what you think of today's very interesting interview in the comment section below. If you're watching us currently live, please make sure you say hello in the chat to the right of the show. If you're new around here, you just haven't done it yet, we're living on a rock and seeing this video for the first time, I don't know what you're waiting for. Hit that subscribe button below now so you never miss another sit down video. Welcome in, everybody. This is episode 161 of the Sit Down. I am your host, Jeff Nadu. And when we talk about the mafia, when we hear organized crime, some of the things we immediately may think of are unions, right? We've seen films about unions. And one of those unions that is more mob connected over the years than any is the Teamsters, the International Brotherhood of Teamsters. Men like Jimmy Hoffa, John Cody down the road, a lot of Teamsters were very involved in being connected to the mob. And what ultimately we saw happen in the 70s and into the 80s is the mob's takeover of locals in the New York area and around the country. And what it led to is the mob's involvement in some of the biggest construction projects the country's ever seen. Today, we're going to get a very interesting look. And I thank our friends at No Excuses, Mikey Scars and RJ. They recently had an individual on called Joe Lanfranchi. And Joe Lanfranchi for years was a steward in Teamsters Local 282. This is one of the most involved unions in New York City. Okay, these are guys that had mobsters all over as stewards and foremen. We're going to get a look today in what the union actually did, what they were involved in, some of the things Joe saw. Again, and I saw Mikey and RJ mention that this is history. Guys like this don't speak much. We're not going to say, obviously, the individual we're having on is not a member of the mafia, but he kind of was involved. He was around them every day, made a bunch of money. How much money is there actually in Teamsters and being involved? Let's ask him. Let's bring him on now. His name is Joe Lanfranchi. Joe, you spent as an inducted kind of Teamster, you were involved over a decade. You were around all sorts of very interesting and powerful people. And there are many union members in America, hundreds of thousands. Quite frankly, there might even be millions of union members in America. Very few, though, have gotten such an intimate look into not only the union, but in the mob. And you were in the union during the boom time in New York, where there's, how many construction projects did you work on over the years and deliver stuff to? Do you know?
Well, I never delivered anything to any construction site.
Oversaw, I meant.
Yeah, but I was probably on about 4 or 5 jobs, and these are big jobs. So they're over 50 at that time. They were over $50 million projects. So anything over 50 million, we were put on these jobs. Over 100 million, there were two, sometimes three Teamster foremen on a job.
So, I want to get into kind of just the crux and just seemingly for a beginner, like what the Teamsters are. But before we do that, I want to talk a little bit about your life because you grew up in Brooklyn, right? You had members of your family that were made members of the Mafia. I know you had kind of likened a lot of your early life to guys like Mikey Scars, right? You've known him for many years. I guess, tell me about your childhood. What was your family like? You're Italian. Tell me a little bit about your childhood.
Well, both my parents are from Sicily. One is from Shaka. They call it Shakidani. My father was from Messina. That's Joey. What's his face came from there that you were talking about.
Yep.
So they're both, Sicilians. I'm a full thoroughbred. I call myself a thoroughbred Sicilian. My mother grew up on Elizabeth Street, and it's funny because Mikey Scar's father grew up on Elizabeth Street. My father's parents, or my father lived on 79th Street between 16th and New Utrecht Avenue, right across the street from New Utrecht High School. He went to high school with Joe Colombo.
Wow.
He was friends with Joe Colombo. They joined the Coast Guard thinking that they were going to be stationed in Brooklyn, and life had a big change for them. Joe Colombo ended up on a ship that took one of the bombs to Tinini.
We talked to his son on here before, and he talked about that.
Yeah,
Absolutely,
and
yeah.
my father ended up in the Battle of the Leyte Gulf.
Wow.
So yeah, growing up in Brooklyn, in that area, I mean, it was all they were all everybody knew everybody.
Well, I think the common theme, and I last week I spoke to a journalist that's from Staten Island, came from Brooklyn, kind of a regular straight guy, and then you talk to guys that were more in the life, and all of them say the same thing. You can't really be from those areas and not have something and someone associated with that life. What did you know about that life,
You
those
know,
people?
yeah, growing up, it was not something that was talked about at the dinner table. I mean, it just didn't happen. Sometimes there was some kind of manual gesticulation that was given at the table, that so and so was connected by using they would like touch their nose or something like that. Meaning the guy's got a button, or he's highly involved, obviously, but it was not something that was in any dialect at any table. It just wasn't talked about.
But again, the people that may have been connected, you could tell there was something about them that was
Special, special.
special.
When they walked in, I mean, the respect that was given, and like I told you in the beginning, I remember being 4, 5, 6 years old. Mike DeBella used to come up into my grandmother's house. He loved my grandmother, and
Tom DeBello.
Tom DeBella. We'd be sitting there, and Tom would walk in, and everybody would, the uncles, my grandmother, make a fuss. And you kind of knew that there was something up with this guy.
Sure. Yeah, and I think I think most of the people that watch these videos, even like someone like myself, I'm not from New York, okay? I don't live in that area. And I think people think of these mob guys as like they're like special people and stuff. But as you know, like that's just like a normal thing in those neighborhoods, right? Like
Yeah,
everyone's a bookmaker. Everybody's
yeah,
a,
yeah.
a whatever. So I heard John Jr. talk about that. He's like, where we were from, like that's just a normal thing. Everybody,
Yeah,
that's just an uncle to me or
right,
whoever.
right.
It's not a
Right.
it's not a weird situation.
It wasn't like Marlon Brando,
Right.
walking in. It
Right.
wasn't like that at all. They were very low key, very respectful, very kind, very considerate. Never a bad thing came out of their mouth ever. Just gentlemen.
What was the first job you had?
Yeah, interesting. The very first job I had, I graduated from St. John's University, and
So you went to college.
yeah, yeah.
So I guess that's an interesting quick question. Your mother and father, they wanted you to, because they obviously, were
Yes,
they first generation or
they were first generation. Yeah,
okay. So
yeah,
for them, they wanted their son to go to
yeah.
school,
I,
be an esteemed member of society.
right. I was an only child.
Oh wow.
My father was a longshoreman. My mother was a housewife. She never worked. Those days women didn't work. So yeah, going to school was a big deal. Go to school, go to school, go to school.
What was your
And
major?
I was a business major, and then after Bruce became a business agent, that the summer before he died, I went back to St. John's and took prep courses to go to law school. Because
Wow.
the big plan was, he wanted a lawyer in the family to
Okay.
run some businesses that could get spin off from, the connections that he had, or we had, or whatever.
Hmm.
But that never came to be because I think it was in May 1979, that's when he was killed.
And the Bruce you're talking about, Bruce K, he was, as you said, involved with the Teamsters. He was a friend of yours. You were friends from when you were kids, right?
Yeah, 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 yeah. And we ended up, we were very close. We ended up buying a house on Long Island, two-family house.
Hmm.
We lived together, and
So
well,
he's kind of your into getting into the union. So you had saw, you wanted to get into law. You wanted to kind of go a really high esteemed way in life.
right.
He though gets involved with the union, and you think at that point, okay, well, I'll do that too.
Well, it was more out of chance. It happened after he was killed. Because I had a lot of issues with the FBI, Nassau County, organized crime, Suffolk County, uh, Queens County, organized crime. I mean, they were on top of me.
What do you mean? They thought you were in the mafia?
Well, he's killed now. Where they're going to come? They're going to come to where he lives.
Tell us, tell us kind of, and again, there's a lot of names here, so I want to kind of keep it uniform. So Bruce K is, as you mentioned, he dies in the late 70s, right? His body's found in a trunk of a car at LaGuardia Airport. Tell us about him and why this happens.
So Bruce was became a business agent for 282. So he was the business agent. Him and Mike Carbone were the business agents for Manhattan. But Bruce was Cody's adopted son.
John
Cody loved Bruce. There was, I mean, just loved him. So here's a guy. He's 27 years old. He became a business agent for one of the biggest, strongest locals in Manhattan.
Right.
So one day, he tells me, comes home, and he says to me, I had a meeting with Paul Castellano and Tommy Bellotti. And he says to me, it didn't go well. And I said to him, what do you mean it didn't go well? So whatever the message was that Cody gave to Bruce to give to them, it became some kind of heated argument. He didn't get into details, because it just, he wouldn't do that, obviously, But he says it didn't go on. I said to him, Bruce, I mean, you were talking to him. I mean, really? And his personality was very low-key. He wasn't boisterous. He wasn't like that. He would blow it off, and, he blew it off and said, and again, don't quote me on time frames. It could have been 3 months, 4 months, 5 months, 6 months later. He tells me that night, I got a meeting with Frankie tomorrow. I said, okay, I'll talk to you.
Who did you think, who was Frankie?
So I figured it was the Chico, Frankie the Chico.
Right.
Okay, I don't know that because he didn't use the last name, but Bruce gave Frankie the Chico his first job when he came out of jail. Frankie the Chico's first job was on the Westbury recycling plant. That was, Bruce gave him that job. I mean, obviously, Robert DiBernardo, DB, told him to put him there. I mean, DB was running the local at that time, and that was before Sammy. So Bruce gave him that job. So him and DB were very close, and he was very close to Frank the Chico. Okay, so the next day, every day we would talk. Sometime during the day, something had to get done, or what's this, or what's that. 3 o'clock comes rolling around. I don't hear from him. So I call the office. Now, Audrey is John Cody's personal secretary. Her office is right outside his office. You're not getting in to see John Cody unless Audrey lets you in, period. End of discussion. But Audrey is Bruce's girlfriend, and she's living with us. So she's living with Bruce K. in my house, our house, not my house, our house. So I called Audrey, did you hear from Bruce? She says, no. I says, oh, okay. Okay, I'll see you when you get home. 6 o'clock comes rolling around. She walks in. We haven't heard from him. At that minute, that second, I knew something was up. I knew. The next morning, I don't hear from him. So I get a hold of Cody. I get a hold of Tom Patrizzo, Tommy Cuccaro. Cody tells me, go to the first precinct and file a missing persons report. So I go to the first precinct. I walk in. My name is I need to file a missing persons report. They take the information. They blow me off. He's probably with a girl. Maybe this, that. Just blew me off. That night, probably the detectives went on a desk. They saw it. They did a little homework, and boom. The next day, they started coming. The detectives came. Now they know that he lives there. Who am I?
They thought you may have been a suspect.
So ultimately, they put me in the newspaper. I had given RJ the article. It was organized crime patrons connected or whatever it was. And they talked about Cody, and then they talked about Bruce's murder. And the next bullet point was Joe Lanfranchi. Okay? The one after that was Frank the Chico. So they were putting me and Frank in a situation where we were suspects. So, I mean, I was probably interviewed by, I don't know how many of these people. I mean, dozens. But wherever I was that day, and I don't remember, it was obviously an ironclad alibi because I couldn't be where he was. You know, it was impossible. And obviously, look, that was not. I mean, I didn't do it. I mean,
He was your friend.
Yeah, he was my best friend. I mean, we grew up together. We lived together. We owned a house together.
Right.
We were, going in businesses together. So yeah, they put me in a hot seat. They really did. My wife and I had told Michael and RJ. My wife was a school teacher 5 miles from my house. She says to me, "What am I going to do? These people read the newspaper." I said, "Don't worry about it. Nothing's going to happen." And sure enough, they made. She became a celebrity. People started looking, at us like, he must be in the Mafia.
Why do you think Bruce K was killed, and who do you think killed Bruce K?
So, whatever happened that day, I'm speculating because I wasn't there. That message didn't go well, and Bruce must have got disrespectful to
High-handed, yeah.
High-handed. He got disrespectful. He must have got to the point where, Paul Castellano was sending a message to Cody. That's what I believe he was doing. He was
basically, we run this, not you.
Right. And what happens is with these guys, they become so headstrong. They think they're invulnerable, and it's their union. It's not their union. It belongs to the family. Sometimes a lot of guys got clipped because of it. Nepotism, bringing their kids in and their relatives. I mean, there was a lot of that going on. Cody's daughter ran the pension and welfare side. So, again, this is purely speculation. I think they were sending Cody a message. Hey, this is your son. Look what we just did to him.
Who do you think killed him?
If I had to guess, and I'm guessing, I think Frank DeChico, because who's gonna lure him someplace with his guard down? Frank was his friend. I mean,
That's how they do it.
Robert DiBernardo, I mean, they were close, they were friends.
So, I mean, someone looking on the outside, my thought would be this would not be a group of people I would want to be involved with a business in. I wouldn't want to be involved with anything. This is overrun by bad people, criminals. Why did you have any interest in wanting to get involved with this? It was just like, I'm going to,
Let's be honest about it, okay? That life is so it's you become like it's like, holy cow, look what I'm involved in,
Yeah.
And it's greed. It's about money. It's about power.
Yeah.
It's about all the bad things in life that eventually will be your demise.
And it's also kind of appealing, right?
It's intoxicating.
Yeah.
It's
right. There's always action, right?
You go places and people like they treat you like you're a movie star. We in New York on these jobs, we were rock stars.
Sure.
I mean, we in the pecking order on a job site, the Teamsters were on top. Everybody else was subservient, and there were some powerful unions.
And that's what I want to ask you, because there's a lot of people here that don't know much about the Teamsters.
And I'm not putting down any of the trades. I mean,
sure.
But
the Teamsters, they deliver all that stuff.
Yeah. Yeah. You're not getting every nail, every bolt, every screw, every piece of steel. I mean, anything that comes, a pencil.
Well, I believe
come on a truck.
There's a speech, and I would think it was probably a normal speech that Hoffa would also would make, and he would say, if you're using something on the job site, a Teamster brought it to you.
Yeah.
Right. So.
Yeah.
Again, it's a huge body. It's a huge and an important union, and if you're a drywall installer or whatever you're doing, concrete, whatever, you need the truck to bring you the supply. Yeah. So it makes total sense. Tell us more before we kind of get into the involvement that you had in the Teamsters and some of the phrases. We hear steward, we hear agent, we hear all these different things. The Teamsters, tell us what that actually is. What do they do?
So a Teamster is basically, it started, they're drivers. They drive a truck and they bring, goods to a location.
Yep.
With Cody, when this construction boom started happening, Cody designed these contracts that were just unbelievable. That they had to make so much money. The pension, they have to give so much to pension and welfare. The 35-hour weekdays, time and a half, double time, double time and a half. Don't forget, if we worked on a holiday night, these jobs ran 24 hours a day. The Teamster foreman was getting paid 24 hours a day.
Wow.
If a job was going on a holiday, a July 4th at night, we'll be getting double time and a half. I said triple time on Mikey's podcast, and somebody corrected me, and I apologize. It wasn't triple time; it was double time and a half.
So John Cody was viewed as like this revolutionized guy because he was creating these, and he's doing everything for the people, the workers.
Yeah.
He was like a hero. So John Cody, tell us a little bit about him, because from what I know about John Cody, like he grew up in Manhattan, was a criminal, went to the military.
Yeah. He went into the military. He was a Marine. Yeah.
Yeah.
Not too many people know that.
And then he started working for like a few dollars a day as a Teamster.
Mm-hmm.
Do you think that he kind of saw it and said, "We're getting all due respect bucked here.
Yeah.
I'm going to be a visionary. I'm a leader, and I'm going to create something for every one of these guys."
Well, he had to be a brilliant man. He had to be a very smart man. He was a tremendous negotiator. I know that we talk about Trump. Listen, Trump was involved. Okay, not directly, through the attorney Cohen. I forget his first name. What's his name? Cohen.
Roy Cohen.
Roy Cohen. When they built Trump Towers, every building in Manhattan was built with steel. Trump Towers was not built with steel. It was built with cement. Mm-hmm. Nobody did that because it was too expensive to do. Trump did it because S&A Concrete, who was owned by Tony Salerno and Paul Castellano, they poured the concrete on that job site. And when you pour concrete, it can't be slowed because it has to be poured at a consistency where it sets up properly.
Mm-hmm.
They had companies that would come and do core samples. And if the concrete didn't cure properly, they would make you tear down, whatever was just poured, a whole floor. They'd make you take it down, So it's very important that these jobs, weren't slowed down. Now, it's reported that Trump's jobs never got touched. That's not true. That's not true. I was involved in a slowdown at Trump Towers. There was a pour one day. They were using non-union laborers or carpenters, and it's not that I made that decision. The order comes down from Cody and says, "Listen, there's something going on." So there's 15 or 20 trucks lined up on Madison Avenue waiting to pour concrete. We'd go there and get the steward. Now the steward is the guy that's the top guy for that company that is in charge of all the drivers for 282. So, we just grab and say, "Listen, got to slow, don't do anything. We'll let you know."
So the steward is the conduit between the drivers and you?
Yes.
And how many stewards are there?
For every company, there's a shop steward.
And when you say company, let's say S&A Concrete, they have their own steward.
Okay. Right, yeah. So every company's got one, right? So they're the liaison between the local, the company, and us, meaning, upstairs. So we slowed that job down, and that day, the bells were going off, and there was a lot of things. Trump, the GC was Morse diesel, and somebody had to make the decision to let them continue the pour. What does that mean? Somebody got a lot of money that day because the job continued. Somebody got paid off. That money went up. Now, Robert DiBernardo, DB, was the conduit. He ran 282, and somewhere somebody got paid.
So he was essentially the John Cody of the mob, right?
So So DiBernardo was the representative of the Gambino family.
Right. They instructed him. He was the leader.
Right. So he went to Cody. He was the one that handled Cody. After DiBernardo got killed, Sammy got that job. Sammy handled 282, and after Sammy flipped, Michael Scars.
So Cody was essentially told, "You do what we tell you. You no longer are the head of this union. We are."
Well, that was always the case
That
from
was always the
day.
case. And
Yeah. I mean, he, of
that was
course.
firmly accepted.
Yeah, that was from the beginning. I mean, that's that union was run by the Gambino family. That union was owned by the Gambino
And you
family.
were okay with that?
Well, again, you become intoxicated. You become infatuated. You're making money. You could do whatever you want. Nobody could touch you. I mean, it's really intoxicating.
What and I don't doubt that. I mean, you look at these guys. It seems like a cool life, but it is also very toxic, as you talk about. So you become a union. You decide, hey, I'm going to go into the union. Do you go through Cody to get in? Like, how do you get in? How's that? What
Yeah,
happens?
yeah, Cody. Yeah. Well, I was around Cody before I was in the union. Don't forget, I would go with Bruce to Cody's house for parties, New Year's. So I was around them. Way
You like
before
them?
that. Yeah, they're very nice people. I mean, you can't say anything bad. They're genuine people. They didn't act like. What does a gangster act like? Are they nasty? No,
Mhm.
they're gentlemen. They're gracious. They're great hosts. I mean,
Mhm.
they're beautiful people.
Cody had a home in the Hamptons, right?
Yes, sure. That was
He was
built.
how much money? Let's say in the early set or late '70s, early '80s. What's John Cody bringing in a year?
Well, he was probably making about 100 grand. Getting paid from 282, and he was probably making 1 million in cash.
You're just stealing it.
Well, I don't know, but yeah, negotiating, you know, different things to let people do so. I
What
wanted
wage?
to talk about Sigmund Soma.
Yep.
Sigmund Soma was like a Trump guy in the early 70s. He was a big contract philanthropist.
Hmm.
He owned a horse called Sham, which came in second at the
Secretary.
Kentucky to Secretariat, right?
Hmm.
So there was and everybody that lives in New York, Long Island, that travels the Cross Island Parkway, there's these apartment buildings that were built in the early 70s that was state of the art. Sigmund Soma was the GC. Cody, Sigmund Soma gave Cody an apartment, a penthouse apartment, because of his, Cody's ability to let this guy build this project without any problems. Nobody touched him. Cody ended up getting an apartment, which Bruce and I used many, many, many nights. I mean, the place was just gorgeous, a penthouse, and this place was gorgeous. So these are the things that went on.
A lot of
Sometimes
perks.
he invested $500,000 in two apartments below Donald Trump's apartment.
Wow.
Two. He invested $500,000 with this woman that had no credit, no job. She got all these loans to buy these two apartments. Cody invested $500,000. Trump ended up suing her for $250,000 because she did alterations that weren't allowed.
I remember
She
heard about
ended. Well, look it up. She ended up suing him for $2 million. Trump settled it. He ended up paying her off to get rid of her.
Wow. Yeah, I remember hearing about that. What would you say as far as the national Teamsters are concerned? How powerful was John Cody to like the national?
He was the most important Teamster president in the country. Think
Okay.
about it. It's New York
Yeah, it's New
City.
York City.
During the heyday of construction, think about what was being built in the 70s and 80s. IBM, AT&T building, Battery Park City, World Trade Center, all
Traffic.
these subway jobs. I mean, the city was just blustering with
That's
jobs. It was
insane.
incredible.
Well, that's why it's funny when you hear like what we've seen now in the media and stuff is people use certain things to benefit their argument, and it's Donald Trump dealt with the mafia. It's like everyone did, right?
You had no choice.
It's impossible to not deal with them.
Impossible.
As you
Yeah.
alluded to, they literally ran the biggest local in the city. I want to ask you, like, a normal day for you. All right. So we see like on television, like a Sopranos, right? Where like
Right.
they're sitting around the
Right.
no-show job, they're eating
Right.
donuts and
Right.
sunning themselves, and everybody else is working. Tell me about a normal day. You were a steward. What was your normal day?
So what the contractor would do, they have to dig a hole, right? They start with the demolition. They may have to knock down the building and start digging a hole. So they would provide us with a trailer, these big,
Yeah, those
one
big.
buys, one buys, right?
Mhm.
And we'd have phones, coffee machines, whatever. This was right at the front of the job, and we would control the gate. You know, nobody was coming in without, you know, and we knew who had contracts, who didn't. If a guy tried to, like sometimes a company would have to send somebody in a pinch to deliver something. He didn't have a book. Cody came up with this brilliant idea. No problem. I would have a list of like 4 or 5 guys in the local that weren't working, right? I'd go to the GC. I'd say, listen, you got a delivery out there. You know, he doesn't have a book. You know, here's a name and social security number. Write the check out Friday to this guy. And the guy who wasn't working got a day's pay, and more importantly, he got you know, the credit for his pension and welfare. So Cody thought of that. I mean, it was a great idea. So nobody got in without paying. Somebody had to pay something, you know. And
but you wouldn't say your job was incredibly strenuous on a daily basis.
no, so you know, if I told the GC, listen, I won't be around for a month and a half, they would love that. They would just, you know, all right, you know.
So you could just not come for like
Yeah,
a month.
yeah, you know. So you know, we'd show up. First of all, the last job I had was on Madison Avenue. So across the street was the IBM building, the AT&T building, right? So and on Park Avenue, next block was Trump Tower. So there were like 4, 5, 6 of us, and every morning, a bunch of us, Patty and Nino, me and a couple other guys, Frank the Chico would show up. We'd have breakfast in this luncheonette on Madison Avenue. We'd have breakfast, you know, laugh, do this, do that. We'd all split, you know, go to our jobs, and then meet up for lunch, and then go home. You know?
Like a license to steal. It was pretty simple.
Well, there wasn't, you know, I didn't design the job. You know, I was just following. I was following the, you know, protocol.
You've mentioned, and I'll have you say it here. You mentioned in like the '70s, you were making over $100,000 a year.
Yeah.
And I saw, you know, one thing I know you see and you deal with in this is there's always these. That's not true. There's no way.
Yeah,
you know.
Yeah.
And I've always found that funny because you lived this.
Well,
Like,
even
I find it fascinating that people come in. You're wrong. It's like,
Yeah.
well, what would I have to
well,
make?
even in the newspaper article, it says, you know, that I was initiated in local, and I was making 42,800 a year, but that was 42,800 for 35-hour week. That
Yeah.
wasn't including overtime,
Sure,
you
holidays.
know, and all that stuff. So you know, even if I was making 50,000 a year, I mean, do the, you know, translate those in today's dollars.
How does so your the money you're making, right? So let's say you make 100,000. How does the pension, at least for you, work? Like, how much are they taking each time?
So at that time, and again, you know, this is recollection. If we were making, you know, $10 an hour, an additional $5 was going into the pension and welfare.
Wow.
So it was a considerable amount. Again, this is recollection. So if one of the experts come in and say, you know, that's not true, you know, I could be off whatever, but it was a considerable amount based on the hourly wage.
Wow. So there's, I mean, when you retire, there's, I mean, it's
Guys, I mean, you know, some of these, the guy that was on Uncle Frankie was on the World Trade Center. He was on that job for like 20 years.
yeah, that's
One guy.
insane.
I mean, you know,
What that was the really attractive part of it, right? I mean, obviously working there and everything was cool, but you knew down the road. Did you have to have, like, we see like the police, they have to serve a certain amount of time before they get it, you know, was
10
that
years. 10 years.
it's only 10?
At that time, 10 years.
Wow, that's
Yeah.
insane.
10 years you were vested. Yeah.
Okay. So I guess back to when we were talking about Bruce K, you had mentioned that the mob did that as a way to say, hey, this is our union. We can get to anyone, anytime, anywhere. And it's almost like a scare tactic. It's a way to, hey, don't screw around with us. Everybody works. We all get rich. Just don't upset the apple cart. And they may have viewed Bruce K as, hey, this guy's young. Maybe we view him as a leader, and he's probably not going to listen to us. We'll just get him out of the way. You viewed that as, okay, like when you see that, do you think, okay, I'm just going to shut up. I'm going to take my money, and that's it?
Well, you know, we had to go on missions. You know, every once in a while there was a mission. You know.
What do you mean?
Well, you know, somebody got out of order. You know, somebody needed to get talked to.
When you say out of order, is that like a worker?
No, sometimes, you know, Like one of the general contractors testified that two or three 282 guys came up into his office and threatened him and the workers in the office, right? Which is a total lie. We would never have to threaten anybody. We made suggestions. You know, I was a diplomat, you know.
But is that your word for what it was, or was it like no? What you're saying? No one went in and said, "Hey, we're going to throw you off the 70th floor." If you
No,
don't.
no, never. No, that didn't happen. Not in those settings. I'm
Because
not
we have
saying.
heard reports from certain jobs of people mysteriously falling out of windows and
Yeah, yeah, I'm sure that happened, you know, but on a normal everyday occurrence, we wouldn't go into a general contractor's office and start threatening him. That would never happen. You know, we made suggestions. We think you
and
should
they
do
usually
that.
would comply.
These are smart men, you know, these are highly educated men, you know, that are running these jobs. I mean, you know, they're engineers, I mean, from Harvard and this, and I mean, they got the hint. We didn't have to threaten anybody.
They
I
just
mean,
kind
that,
of
yeah,
took
it's a
that.
suggestion. That's all.
Fair
And
enough.
you know, there was one guy that was 6'2", another guy that was 5'8" and 400 pounds. I mean, they knew. You know,
So it was a very smart. You positioned the right people in it and made it could have been a bit intimidating. Let's
yeah.
just be honest.
Well, it was intimidating.
But you
It was
used okay.
right, right. Tried
So
to
you
be a diplomat.
mentioned you mentioned the level of construction projects going on, right? Um, I guess my question is, we've heard like on wiretap, like there's a wiretap with Tony Ducks Corallo and I believe it's Sal Avellino, and they actually mentioned Cody, right?
Yeah, yeah,
What
yeah.
was like the other families? Obviously, we know Gambino, the Gambino crime family had a nice holdover the local 282, but did you work with any other groups as well on
Yeah,
anything? Because it
yeah.
intertwines.
It's all intertwined because one family had the laborers.
Yep.
That was a different family. Who had the operating engineers? That might have been a different family or was a different family. So yeah, I mean, there was always intertwining. You know, people had to commiserate with one another, like
Who
the
were
concrete.
you like?
Yeah, I'm
What
sorry,
guys were you dealing with from other families? Did you ever deal with any directly?
not directly, no.
Okay. Um, you mentioned Tom Patrizzo.
Yeah,
So Tom, as you talked about, Tom Patrizzo is,
that's not
you
Tom Petrizzo.
it isn't.
No, that's not
That's
Tom.
that seemingly is a mistake then, because
That
that's
is not
that's
Tom Petrizzo.
that's been
Uh,
widely formulated photo of Tom Patrizzo.
Not
Really
Tom Petrizzo. No. Ask RJ to send you the photo of Tom.
interesting, because I've seen Tom Patrizzo. It does look a lot like him.
Yeah, it's not. Definitely not.
Well, that's my first mistake I've ever made on throwing a picture up. Tell me about Tom Patrizzo though. He's a steel guy, very very rich guy.
Yeah, Tom Petrizzo owned a company called AJ Ross. It was a company in Keysby, New Jersey. It was a massive, massive. He had a piece of property that was on the Raritan River. He had a rail yard on the property. Ships or barges could dock on the property, so they bring these steel girders, and he would stage all this steel to go into these buildings. He also produced or cut rebar. It said that a lot of companies. There was only one or two companies. Tom was producing rebar, not producing it, but cutting it to size for these jobs. Tom was so under the radar. Nobody knew anything about Tom. Tom was regarded as this businessman. He was a family man. He would hobnob. I mean, I'd go to meet. Don't forget, after 282, I worked. I went to work for AJ Ross. I worked for AJ Ross. I had a position with them, and I would go to meetings with Tom. With the president of U.S. Steel and these big companies. And he would wine and dine them, and they loved him. And he got all these contracts. No one knew anything about him. Nothing
And in
until
turn, this guy was a sitting member of the mafia.
he was a capo. Yeah, for Carmine. His daughter married Carmine Persico's son, Michael. Yeah, and he was a powerhouse. Ultimately, he got shelved because of the arena thing.
Sure.
He sided with Arena. And I was in Vic Arena's company a million times. We used to go to the Garden City Hotel all the time and hang out. And Vic, Tom and Vic were always together. but Tom sided with him, and ultimately that went
Yep.
sideways, and they shelved him.
Sure, that wasn't good, right?
No.
Let me. This could be a stupid question, but forgive me. I'm just curious on this. We see like these huge industries, right? So we'll take, let's just say, gambling, right? There's a commissions in states that oversee and regulate gambling, right? There's any business has regulated people above them. You look at like stocks. You have the SEC, and they look into financial stuff.
Right.
Why was there no, and there may be, and maybe you can educate us,
Yeah.
this seems like incredibly corrupt. Why is there not anyone above this that says these people, and I've read so many reports over the years, this person was associated with organized crime and he's unable to be connected. We had Peter Lavoglio on recently. He discussed that with his involvement with trash companies and knowing people.
Right.
Why was it so rife with corruption? I mean, this goes back, many years. Why was this allowed to continue? Why didn't
Well,
anyone do anything about it?
well, there was a thing called the NLRB, National Labor Relations Board,
Sure.
which oversaw the Teamster locals. But obviously, there had to be corruption on that end, because I mean, this. How could anybody not know what was going on? I mean,
Yeah.
yeah, it wasn't blatant. It wasn't, out in the open. But, if he was a semi-intelligent person, you have to know there's got to be something going on. And how it really went sideways is when Cody got indicted, the federal government brought in a judge called Judge Joseph Mishler. He came up into the local. He ran the pension and welfare side. You're not touching this money anymore.
Mm-hmm.
You're not making loans. Don't forget, Cody bought a country club on Eastern Long Island with the money from the pension fund, and was going to loan, and this is going back, I'm going to say early 70s, he was going to loan money to somebody in Las Vegas to build
Casinos.
a casino, a 1,000-room casino.
Was it this simple to, like, we saw in The Irishman, like Jimmy Hoffa has this vault in his office and he just takes money out and hands it to people. Is it as brazen as just, hey, what was the secretary's name?
Audrey, yeah.
What was it, just as simple as, hey, Audrey, go down and get 200,000 out of the fund? Like, what
No,
was it that brazen?
no,
Like,
no. There
like,
was
can you
no.
just go to the bank and be like, hey, withdraw this for me?
Yeah, yeah, and they
Wow.
would, yeah, and they had lawyers that would do it, and they would,
I mean, he's a person. We would all do it. If
right.
I saw 200,000 sitting outside my house, I'd probably take it.
No, he didn't do that. No, he didn't do that. It was all done legitimately with lawyers. I mean, they had to make it rock solid, otherwise,
So it
something
wasn't
would
as
go.
brazen as they may lead on.
No.
And
There was
also,
no cash box. No.
okay. And also, as you talked about, you weren't necessarily sitting in lawn chairs on the job site where everybody works. You may
We
have been in
could. Well, eventually we got apartments, So
okay.
as soon as the building went up and, if we were able to, they would give us an apartment.
So you would work out of this apartment.
Yeah, and, it was a full-fledged apartment,
Wow.
beds and
No way.
kitchens. Yeah.
So you
And it
were
was,
literally working 24 hours, but you weren't really working 24 hours. But
yeah, yeah,
wow, insane. That's
yeah,
insane to me.
yeah.
Unions are so interesting because,
Yeah.
like I told you, where I live, my father was a concrete construction guy for his whole life. My dad
Right,
would never work for no union. Like he was a private company, and
right.
that's how it is out here. Like there are unions, but like it's not like this.
No,
You
and
know,
what makes it very interesting is, I could tell these stories, and if there was nobody that could corroborate they said this guy's full of
you wouldn't
baloney,
believe it. That's
But
insane.
but Mikey Scars had the same exact job I did,
Yeah,
So
yeah. And I want to
uh,
talk about Michael. I want to talk a little bit about DB. You mentioned John Cody. In the early 80s, he was arrested. And this is where the feds. Do you look at like the John Mishler types as kind of in a way similar to like a Robert Kennedy, where he just said, you know what? We're done with the mafia in this country. We're going to attempt to take them out. We're going to start trying to hit them where they can. Do you look at John Mishler and say, wow, he was the kind of the one that said, you know what? I'm done watching this happen. We're going to set an example to people like John Cody. He was kind of the first shoe to drop, right?
yeah, well, it was the federal government. He was just a vehicle,
Who do you
that
think? Who do you think instructed him to do that?
well, the feds, whoever was running,
They were just done with it.
yeah, whether it was, again, I don't know who, but yeah, it was the federal government, They were
So
all over it,
John
all over it.
John Cody in '82 was convicted of labor racketeering, tax evasion, he gets 5 years.
Right.
After his conviction, Robert Sasso takes over. But I want to just kind of put kind of a button with John Cody. It's been reported that he attempted to hire someone to kill Robert Sasso.
Yeah.
Do you just look back and just think like John Cody was just a criminal? Just a,
Well, John, at that point, John, he was, out of his mind.
Sure.
Guys like that don't want to relinquish, what they have. They just don't want to. Now, here's a guy, he's convicted, he's in jail. He don't want to give up the local. And at that time there was two factions. There was the Cody faction and the Bobby Sasso. So there were Cody guys and Sasso guys.
Kind of like with Jimmy Hoffa and
Fitzsimmons.
Yeah.
So even though they were on the same floor, their offices were down the hall from each other. I mean, they had to talk every once in a while, but they hated each other.
But there was a stark. They didn't like each other.
Tension. But they again, two factions at that time.
Was Robert Sasso more kind of complicit with the mob guys?
He was the Bonanno guy. He was with the Bonannos.
Right.
Yeah.
So he kind of had his teeth dug in. Cody wasn't Italian.
He used to go to tallies all the time with Sammy. And that had to stop. Because Sammy got kind of like stupid. I mean, you're bringing these guys into tallies. Everybody's watching that place.
Right.
You're bringing the president of the local, Mike Carbone, Bruce Kay into that place. Oh, come on.
Yeah, and when Cody attempted to have Mr. Sasso killed, it was called a desperate attempt, and it was. I mean, he was kind of reaching. He was in jail. He even hired like some inmate essentially.
He was an informant. He was an FBI informant. Yeah.
Right. So for that, so the John Cody experiment was over. But just kind of putting a button on him, you do view him though as a real revolutionary. This is a guy who transformed for the regular worker.
For what he did for people, the worker and that industry, in my opinion, outweighed all the bad things he did. Because his influence is still being felt today, not only by the Teamsters, by every union in the country. He set the bar.
Do you think if he doesn't go to jail, do you think he's killed probably?
That's real speculation. That could happen,
Because it does seem like once Sasso becomes involved, he's significantly more connected. They like him a lot more, maybe. And we saw that with Jimmy Hoffa, right?
Yeah, Cody was very, very close to Carlo Gambino. I mean, they were very close.
But as we know, Carlo
dies.
Gone.
He's gone, right?
Paul dies,
right.
And new people come in, and they say, well, we don't want to deal with him anymore.
Yeah. But I think by the time Cody was gone by the time Paul Castellano got killed.
Okay. I want to ask you about that. December 16th, 1985. Do you remember where you were when you heard about that?
Yeah, sure. That was a pretty big deal.
Tell me about that night for you.
Well, we were probably out, whatever, and we got wind of it. It was like, oh my God, just how anybody else would react. Here you go, Paul. Paul and Tommy Bellotti. Now, don't forget, my cousin Anthony, Tony Muscles, was married to Tommy Joe Bellotti's daughter.
Oh wow.
And Anthony he was the president of the roofers union in Manhattan because of the marriage. But Anthony ended up going away. He got 15 years because he was a maniac.
Right.
He threatened her over the phone. He got caught on the phone. It was crazy.
Did you? I mean, I'm going to ask you a question. I don't know if you want to answer it. Did you kind of feel vindicated? I mean, he probably ordered the death of your friend.
Nah, I really didn't think of it like that.
You didn't think of it like that?
No, because don't forget, that life, the way that life was, I mean, I understood, nothing was ever personal with these people. So they didn't get mad at you and kill you, They got mad because you did something wrong, you did something bad, you broke a rule.
You're a full Italian. You were essentially, I mean, you weren't inducted, but you're almost thinking a lot like a mob guy, right?
Well, when it came a point, when I was with Tom every day. I mean, I picked them up in the morning, and we go to work every single day. Patrizzo.
So you're like his driver.
Yeah, it came a point. He says, we got to do something with you. you can't stay with me unless and that meant, he was going to put me on a list,
Sure.
you
I
know.
want to get into obviously the DB, what happened with him and everything, but obviously John takes over for Paul. What did you know about John? Did you know much about him?
John
Gotti.
Gotti, yeah, I mean, I never met him, but, yeah, of course I knew about him. I knew who he was.
Did you think the death of Paul? What did you think as far as the union was concerned? Did you think that would affect much?
No, I think business would continue. I mean, don't forget that was the golden goose.
Yeah.
Why would anybody want to disrupt that? That was a well-oiled machine. That it was a well-oiled machine. Things were going smooth. I mean, nobody had to do anything. I mean, it was just everyday business. So why
On a
would you want to
regular,
disrupt that?
yeah, no, of course, it would be crazy to want to disrupt it. On a regular day, like a normal day at the site, you mentioned you went out to breakfast, things like that. You mentioned Tom, Frank DeChico. Who else were you seeing on a regular basis in that world?
Last job I had was 535 Madison Avenue, and Sammy had Ace Drywall was on that job, and yeah, I met Sammy one or two times on that job. He would come strolling down Madison Avenue, and once in a, we had some issues, and his partner, I forget who his partner was. He ended up killing him.
Uh, Melito,
No, not Molito, the other one.
DeBat, Mormondo.
Yeah, I
Um,
forget. Anyway, so he was part owner with Ace, and he would come to the job once in a while.
oh,
When,
you're talking
when
about
these his brother-in-law, I think, right?
yeah, Shabetta.
No, it wasn't Shabetta.
That was his
No.
brother-in-law.
Yeah,
Either way,
yeah,
so
and,
you
yeah.
okay?
Yeah, so yeah, Sammy, once in a while, I mean, like I said, I met Sammy one or two times. Gentlemen, he could come strolling down Madison Avenue. In Christmas time, the partner, I forget his name, he'd come and drop off envelopes and, we divvy them
You
out.
you mentioned like you most of the people were talking about you had you liked they were all right. Was there anyone in that world that you just didn't you weren't a fan of?
That's an interesting question. And you know what? I got to think about that because,
Because like to me, like and again, I've interviewed Sammy, I've had issues with Sammy. There are times where he comes across like a really nice guy, and then there's times where he seems like a total lunatic and very
yeah,
unlikable.
yeah, yeah.
So
I,
I'm curious if there's
I
anyone that
can't answer that question off the top of my head, but if it pops into my head, I'll tell you.
yeah, please do. So for the most of your tenure with the Teamsters, DB was in control of 282 for the Gambino crime family.
Right.
He's a guy we've I've done a show on him long time ago. DB's a guy who, obviously very rich guy, had a
Yeah.
huge home,
Mm.
made a bunch of money in the porn world, that sort of
Mm.
thing. Um, I guess, and he was almost kind of a guy who operated kind of on his own. Like he didn't
Mm.
really have any, no one was above him,
Mm.
but he was a Paul guy, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
He is obviously whacked in 1986, and we now know that it was Sammy, right? And then Sammy takes over.
Right.
What was the transfer of power like? And did you see a significant difference in the union when DB was in control? And now that Sammy's in control, his boy Sasso is the guy at the top.
Right.
Was there a stark difference between the
No,
two?
nothing changed. I mean, everything, again, it was
Business as usual.
business as usual. I mean, these things were set in stone. The contracts were set in stone. Nobody really had to do anything that was abnormal. Uh, I got a funny story about DB and the porn thing. I don't know if you want to
Tell
hear
me,
it,
yeah.
but yeah. So Bruce was very close with him, and when the Deep Throat came out, and
Yeah.
he was the guy that got all these
Sure.
tapes out. And in those days, in every video store, they had a sex section in the back. Right, it was always in
I
the back of
remember
the store.
even
Right,
when I was a kid, like A to
right.
Z videos, you had to go in like a room.
Yeah, to see. So Deep Throat came out, and Bruce says to me, "Listen, we're going to get a delivery today. When the truck comes, just open the garage door. The guy's going to bring some boxes in, right?" So this van pulls up, white van pulls up, backs up, and I showed you a picture of the house, right? So there's a two-car garage. So the van pulls up, and the guy starts emptying these boxes, right? I don't know, 10, 20, 30, 50, right? Thank you very much. Bruce comes home. they're the VHS tapes. Deep Throat, who we got from DB. DB, gratuity, maybe, whatever. He'd get rid of them, How are we going to get rid of these things? So Luca Brazzi, Lenny Pastafaro lived around the corner from us.
You're talking about the real actor,
The
Lenny
real
Montana.
actor. Yeah, Lenny Montana. He lived around the corner. So Bruce gets Lenny Montana. He comes to the house. Here comes Lenny Montana. He looks like a big, morphodite. His hands are like, the size of, hands, right? So we tell him, listen, we want $5 a tape. Whatever you get, after that is yours. Oh, thank you very much. With that voice.
Wow, really? So you had Lenny Montana pushing Deep Throat on the street?
So he took all the things. He would go into these places. He'd walk in. They would just say, "Oh yeah, okay, no problem. I'll take them all."
How much do you think he was selling each tape for?
Maybe
$20.
Yeah, maybe 10. Whatever. So we got our money. He was happier than what, and it's just a funny story. Yeah,
wow, that's great. Because in The Godfather, he comes across. He's like very, when he walks in at the wedding, he's like,
he was like that in real life.
Wow, so you would say he was extremely vivid to the real person.
Yeah, he was kind of like that.
Yeah, he's a really interesting guy. I've done some stuff on him. It was super interesting. So he was actually, wow.
He died on those wooden picnic tables. Remember when we were kids? They were with the slots, and you had those chairs, right?
Yeah.
He died right on the table. They couldn't even get him off the table. That's how big
he's
that
so
guy
big,
was.
right?
Yeah. He had a heart attack in the summertime. Yeah.
Yeah, Lenny Montana, really interesting guy. Well, I'll probably do a show on him at some point. Wow, that's a great story.
Yeah.
How much do you think you made off those?
I have no idea. I don't.
You were just getting them.
Yeah, it was maybe we made 20, 30. Maybe we made 20 or 30 grand. Maybe he made just as much. Whatever.
That's
I don't.
amazing.
I don't remember.
So you're a full. You're making money not just at the unions. I guess in your best years. I don't know if you want to tell us. You're making a lot of money.
Yeah. I was comfortable.
Sure.
I was comfortable. I wasn't on the level like a DiBernardo or Sammy or Mikey Scars. No. Mm-hmm. We lived in a really nice house. It was nice home. I had boats. Cars.
Life is good.
Yeah, all the things that you want.
We have obviously more story to get to, but I think there's one thing that I've seen with you, like when I hear you speak and even you talking to me, and I see the same thing in you that I see in a lot of these guys that I speak to. There is such it really seems like you miss those days. Like
RJ asked me that question, and he says, looking back, and I told him honestly, if I could turn back the clock, I wouldn't hesitate. And I said the same thing to Mikey Scars, and Mikey looked at me and he said, you know what, you're right, Those are days that are really hard to give up, and I would go back. And if I knew what I knew now, I'd probably be a lot smarter, though.
Oh, sure. Well, aren't we? Wouldn't we all?
Yeah, exactly.
You mentioned the World Trade Center, which obviously we all know what happened to the World Trade Center. Were you ever in the World Trade Center?
Yeah, of course. Yeah.
You went all the way to the top?
Yeah. Matter of fact, Building 2. We discussed this on the show. They had a topping off party. So when they build the last floor, the general contractor has a topping off party, right? Mm-hmm. So here we are. We get in. The elevator's on the outside of the building. It's an open thing, right? There's no sides to it. It's made out of steel. They bring the people up, the workers, material, and it's bolted to the building. And here you go. The operating engineer sends you up. I don't know, 113 stories, whatever. I don't know. 1,300 feet, insane. And here we go on top. There's no walls, right? And you freak out.
Why would anyone? That seems horrible.
But nothing can happen to you. The floor is pretty big. You're not going to get blown off. And there's they put up these safety things and nets and all that stuff. But yeah, so that's what the GC would do when they poured the last floor. They'd have a topping off party. And they'd invite all dignitaries. They'd bring food. Sometimes they'd have music. Depending how big the job was.
Yeah, party.
Yeah. It's cool.
That's insane. But I got to ask, and I don't want to go too deep into this because YouTube doesn't like this kind of talk. 2001, obviously, the September 11th attack happens. Yeah. I watched. It's interesting that I'm speaking to you today because I watched something last night on the FDNY, and they talked about that day. Right. And the fire department had no belief that the towers will collapse.
Yeah.
And they end up talking with a structural person. They say,
Right.
"Yo, this is going to go down."
Right.
You're around a lot of steel,
Right.
right?
It seems impossible.
Yeah, I that's the one thing I never have understood about the whole thing. And obviously, look, 3,000 plus people died,
Yeah.
343
Yeah.
firefighters died.
Yeah.
The heroic
Yeah.
effort of the firefighters
Yeah.
was insane.
Yeah.
But it does seem really far fetched.
Don't
That
forget when they build these buildings, there is so much wiggle room because these
right,
buildings move. They
yeah,
actually,
right, sure,
some of these buildings are built on isolators, where they actually have to move, Uh, the Citibank building, if you do some research on the Citibank building, that was one of the first buildings that were made to like move like 6 or 7 inches from side to side.
yeah. You don't think about that, but it's kind of
Yeah.
wild.
Think about the wind, 1,300 feet. If
Oh
there's a
yeah,
hurricane,
sure, sure,
it's a
sure.
cantilever. If you know anything about physics,
Yeah,
it's so hard for me to believe. I don't know, but
it's
what do I know?
it's obviously to think about it. What 25ish years later, it is kind of hard to believe. But
Yeah,
that
it's
said, I
sad. It's
mean,
sad.
that was so high, the World Trader. My God.
Yeah.
So when you went up that high, that had to make you a little uneasy.
Oh my God, I was scared. So, forget about it. I was.
Like I would have
I have
absolutely
a,
no interest in going to that
I
place.
have a thing with. I can't stand on a rail like on a railing in a building.
No,
And I can't do it. And look over. It's like
no
whoa.
one can.
Yeah,
It,
yeah.
and that's another level of height.
Yeah, that's another level.
Like
Yeah,
that's
yeah,
high.
yeah.
That's
But
not like 3 stories or something.
you're with all these men, and I'm sure all of them were just as scared as I was. But they're not showing it, and I'm certainly not going to show it.
But
Don't
inside, you're
forget,
like your
you
palms are
know,
sweaty.
I'm 165 pounds now. Back then, I was 210,
Okay,
so I was like a big boy.
sure.
So yeah, you can't show any kind of
You don't want to show
weakness.
any weakness around
No,
them guys.
no, you can't.
Fair enough.
They make fun of you.
So Sammy takes over.
Yeah,
There's a new president. It's Robert Sasso.
right.
I want to issue. You mentioned him and his connections to the Bonanno family. Actually, a family that I know that was quite formidable in your union was Joe Jr. and Joe Sr.
Hmm.
You mentioned how are they connected to the union?
Through who? Through
How were
whom?
how were they connected? Yeah, like how did they get those jobs?
Well, the kid, the son.
Yeah,
Well, obviously, Cody gave him the job. And
but his
senior.
father was close. I'm saying, right?
Yeah, yeah, his father was close. Yeah, yeah. I don't know who the father was with. Mikey would know. Off the top of my head, I don't know. But Mikey Scars would know. I think he had mentioned it. Who Joe Camarano was.
Yeah.
With.
You were around Michael quite a lot. Did you know him from when you were
No,
young?
no,
No.
no.
How did that start?
Me and
Through the
Mikey.
Yeah.
Well, how did I get hooked up with Mikey
Hmm.
recently? Well, when Mikey started doing his podcast, I reached out and in my emails to him, I was with 282, and this and that, and he kind of like vetted me, right? I mean, Mikey was going to go touch anybody that was full of baloney, right?
Yeah, I do that too. Sure.
Right. And so he vetted me, and then one thing led to another, and we. I mean, we meet at the Hard Rock once in a while now. We go out and hang out.
So when you were in the union, you
No,
never knew him.
I never, but he was on a job site, same time I was.
Wow.
Yeah,
Huh.
yeah.
It's a wonder you never crossed paths.
No,
Interesting. So when we see Paul go, we obviously see the commission trial happen. Did you kind of view that and say, okay, this is going to change for us considerably? What did you think that way?
no, not at all.
You just thought it would last forever.
Yeah, again, why would they mess with something that was like the golden
Well, I'm not
goose?
saying they would mess with it. I'm saying,
Right.
did you feel like the oversight was
Yeah, oh yeah, yeah, yeah.
gonna?
Well, we knew, we knew guys were gonna get pinched. That's why Tom pulled me out of the union. Tom made me give up my book.
So
just
you were just looking to get to that 10 years.
Yeah. So Tom, you're coming to work with me. You're staying with me, and that you got to get out of there. You're gonna get locked up.
Wow. So he viewed you and said, "Hey, you're gonna get jammed up with all
Jammed
these
up.
guys.
Yeah,
Just
yeah,
come work."
yeah.
Okay, wow.
And
So
sure
you
enough,
you probably owe him a lot, right?
yeah, Sure enough, shortly after, Carbone got pinched, Sasso got pinched. I don't know who else, but yeah, they all got locked up.
And that's how it all ended.
That's how it all ended.
You mentioned you missed those days. How
Mm,
couldn't you? We all
right,
remember those good
right.
times in life that, whether
Yeah.
they're, you know, go ahead.
No, and people could say, what kind of character is he? He's a bad guy. He's involved with bad people, and how can you be around people like that? And again, it's intoxicating. I'll take you, somebody that's a frozen rope, straight as an arrow, and I'll convert you. I promise you, I'll
I'm
convert you.
sure.
It's not
I mean,
hard.
but at the end of the day, everything we do is for one thing, right?
It's man, it's all about money.
It's all about money, and people will go to look at the lengths people will go to keep making money.
Right.
I have to ask because you mentioned you're around some pretty crazy characters. They have a major influence over something, and you mentioned there were no threats. There were no hey, go do this to that guy.
No, no.
Let's just say you're at the job site, you're in the trailer, and I don't know, Frankie DeChico comes in and says, "Hey, this guy's a problem at this point.
Oh yeah, yeah.
I need you to deal with it." You would
Yeah,
have no issue dealing with it.
no, again, these are I call them missions. We'd have to go on a mission here and there. Yeah, somebody would have to.
Did you ever think like once you left the union and you started working with Tom and you get into let's say the '90s, did you ever think they would come knocking
Who?
the feds?
You know, yeah, you think about it. Can they? Would they come after you? But there's statutes of limitations.
Sure,
And, there's no
only so
statute
long.
for murder.
Hmm.
But again, wherever I was at that time, I mean, look, they ran through me like every day. Somebody was like questioning me. So if they had any hesitation at all, I mean, it was in their best interest to indict me, right, and let me fight it because most of the time, guys that get indicted, I mean, they're not going to win. You're not beating the government.
No,
The federal government has two things on their side. They print money and they make the laws. You
you
ain't
can't
beat
beat them.
You
Right.
can't beat them.
Right. You left the union, late '80s. I mean, it's 2024. What did you do after the unions? Like,
So yeah, good question. So first, I went into the boat business. I had a Donzi and a Formula dealership uh, on Long Island. This is now in the '90s. And then I went into the car business. I had a car dealership,
oh, really?
A Jeep dealership. Yeah.
Did you ever? You obviously still maintain contact with people in the union. Did you ever maintain any contact with the other guys in the union?
Yeah, they used to come and buy cars from me.
Oh yeah,
Yeah, of
did you give them
course.
deals?
Yeah, of course.
Who bought cars from you? I'd love to know.
Oh my God, so many of the
And what kind of
guys.
cars they buy? Who was it?
Well, I was a Jeep dealership, you know.
Okay.
So
Name
Jeep.
one guy that came and bought a car from you.
Oh God. Oh my God. Well, Michael. The Persicos would come.
Okay.
Uh, that I remember off the top of my head. Um,
Now, how do those negotiations go? Do they just assume they're going to get a deal in the car?
yeah, no, they wouldn't
My
negotiate.
God,
No, they
how does
wouldn't
that work?
negotiate. They wouldn't negotiate. Joey, I want a car. Okay, go pick it out. What do you want? Yeah, okay, all
Like,
right.
how much are you discounting the car?
I take everything out. I'd give them the car for cost.
Wow.
Yeah,
Wow, really?
you'd have to make money on them. Nah, I wouldn't. Wouldn't do that.
Do you look at I'm curious about someone like yourself. Do you look at like what I do and you think like this would never happen in the '80s? You know, like, it's kind of crazy, isn't it? How
What
like
would
how we're
happen?
able to do this stuff and talk about these people like it's
Yeah, no, no,
like
no.
it's kind of insane, isn't it?
No, you'd end up in the landfill someplace.
Yeah, it's kind of insane. And
Yeah.
and I mean that no disrespect. It's just the world
No.
has changed
Yeah,
considerably.
yeah, No, you mentioned the word mafia today, and wise guys. And people laugh at it, who cares? He's a why? Who cares? What's he gonna do?
Yeah.
But I don't know about that. You know,
there are definitely tough people still
Yeah,
around for sure.
yeah,
I don't,
yeah,
I don't,
yeah.
I don't ever sugarcoat that. Um, the Teamsters today, obviously the control is, again, there are, I'm sure, a few unions that have some control of the mob still in it, but I've always said it wasn't necessarily the one thing the government did really well in this country is extinguish the mafia and their control of things. Because at one point, as you know, the mafia ran a lot of industry. They ran unions. They ran everything. And today, it's significantly different. Do you know anything about the union now? What's it like now?
No, I'm sure, there's things going on. I mean, that never stops, not to the level of where it was, but I'm sure they're pushing companies around, I'm sure that still goes on, They still have the ability to call strikes. They still have the ability to slow companies down, As long as it's done within the law, no one could stop them.
That's one thing I wanted to ask you. Do you remember any major shutdowns of work? Like, what did that do for you? Like, do you remember any of those?
Yeah, it used to happen all the time. We used to
And
love
how long
it.
would they go for?
Not long. Some, well, I shouldn't say, some may go a couple of hours, some may go a day, maybe
So
two
let's say like a
days.
day. Does that mean you have to leave and like go home?
No, they would still work on the job.
Okay.
They would still have material on the job, right? And
They just couldn't get anything new.
you couldn't get anything new, so they would continue to work. I mean, the job didn't stop. But yeah, they came to a point where the job would stop because I don't have any more nails, I don't have any more sheetrock, I don't have any, whatever.
Hmm. Let me ask you. I'm curious about this. This also could be a dumb question, but I remember like when I worked for my dad when I was a kid, we had these like code officials, right? These code enforcement people. Every
Right,
city has them,
right,
town, whatever.
right.
Did Could the union say to them like, "Fuck off, get out of here"? Like they still have their control, right?
They still have their control on the job site,
And like generally, you followed the code to what.
Yeah, yeah, you wouldn't want to, you wouldn't want to look. The object was not to ruffle people's feathers that could hurt you, or shine a flashlight on you. You
Yeah,
wouldn't want to rough up one of these guys. That wouldn't do that.
and
That'd be
cutting
stupid.
corners would be really bad because we're not
No,
dealing
no,
with like
no, no. You deal with people's lives here.
sure,
Yeah, you don't want to do that.
very interesting. I have to ask you about present day. Does it? And I mean this strictly from like you saw the you dealt with like things he was doing in construction.
All right.
Obviously Donald Trump became the president. Did that surprise you?
Did it surprise me that he became the president? No, no.
Like, what did you know about him as a businessman? Was he?
Guy was a genius. I mean,
Yeah,
listen, look what he did in New York. I mean, it was him. There was the Hemsleys.
yeah,
Leona Hemsley, and her husband were, monsters in construction in New York. But yeah, Trump was, this guy's a genius. I mean, how
sure.
can you take it away from him?
No, you can't. And anybody that does, I just think they have an agenda.
Yeah.
I don't know if I asked, but I want to ask. You mentioned a couple of the big heavy hitters. Obviously, we know Paul, Tony Salerno, Tony Ducks. Did you ever meet any of those guys?
Yeah. Yeah. Over the
What were they
course of,
like?
again, same thing. Very genuine, very respectful. The real guys, it didn't matter if you were the guy that swept the floor or you were Donald Trump. They would. You the same way.
Interesting.
Hello, how are you? How's your family? Are you treating your kids good? Typical, Italian, things that were important to them. Very genuine, very kind, very considerate, very respectful.
So looking back, you do it all over.
Yeah, I think so.
Do you have any regrets?
Things that I've done in the past, we all do. We all do.
So if you could teleport back to 1979, you wouldn't have went a different way in life. I mean, you have to say though, I mean, you look at your life now. I mean, I'm sure you live well. You have something for your family.
Right,
They'll be okay. That's really the dream of
right,
any American, right?
right, right. I mean,
So
listen, we worked all our lives, we worked hard all our lives, and now we were able to, be retired. I live in a gated community in Florida. I have a beautiful home. Uh, what more can I ask for? I have a couple of cars. I eat whatever I want. I
what
buy
more could
whatever
you
I
want?
want.
Yeah.
And I go wherever I want. What could be better than that?
Last question. It is, I think we could say, quite extraordinary the power the mob had at one point, or organized crime had. You look at it today, significantly different. Did you ever think that would happen? Like, for as powerful as it was, did you ever think just, I mean, you have to admit, like I said earlier, that the government did a good job at kind of stamping it out, didn't they?
Yeah, I mean, I never thought, that it would ever go away because don't forget, it was so entrenched, in these communities. I mean, it was just, it was part of life, it was part of everyday life. For me to think that this would go away someday, and again, if we look at history and we look back to, the Sammy things and, all these people that, and I hate the word rat. That word never comes out of my mouth. I just hate it, But, informers, cooperators, whatever you want to call them. I mean, they did a lot of damage. You take Sammy out of the mix. If Sammy wasn't born and you take him out of the mix, it would be a totally different landscape today.
Well, I lied. I have another question. I don't want to take too much of your time, but I keep thinking of things. I talked to someone recently. They are not an informant. They may have been connected to that world, and they essentially told me multiple people that they knew would eventually flip. They didn't have it in them. But there were several people that they said they were really surprised by. You were out of the union by the time Sammy Gravano flips, right?
Was I? What year did he flip? Oh,
1992.
1992.
Yeah.
Yeah, I was out, yeah.
Well, looking back, did that surprise you that he did that?
Oh, yeah.
You couldn't believe it.
Oh, I couldn't believe it because look, Sam, I knew Sammy. I mean, I was, he controlled the union. I mean, for that guy. I mean, and don't forget, at that point, nobody knew that he had 19 murders. I call him 19 minus 2. That's my nickname for him.
Well, and I've talked about it. It's really 2. He conspiracy to kill people,
Right.
but
Right.
the only 2 that he did himself.
Right.
So it was a surprise to you.
Oh, yeah. Oh, my God, yeah. Sammy was a powerhouse. He was King Kong.
Sure.
I mean, on the street, he was King Kong. I mean, the guy was just, renowned. Sammy the Bull?
Do you think it's crazy that he's on YouTube? Does that amaze you?
It does amaze me, but you know what? It gives people, an insight into that
Sure.
life like that, no one has. I mean, there are only 2 people alive that could really give that type of insight. That's him and Mikey Scars.
Sure, they were the only ones around. Sure,
But the
Definitely,
the 2 ends of the spectrum where Mikey is so sincere and believable, and you could see right through the screen that this guy is real. Where Sammy, he talks to the telephone. Hi, phone. Did I screw that girl? And no, you didn't. I mean, come on.
But he also has said before that he did know the girl, and like that's the thing with Sammy. He said one story once, and then like tell.
Listen, I can't. I will never say anything bad about Sammy. I don't have the right to. I don't have the right to.
That's one thing that I look, I've said recently on the live, I'm not absolutely always proud of some of the things I've done on here, and I think I do it in looking out at a grand thought. It's what do I have, right to call anyone a rat? And I've said before, I'm not in the streets. I don't care if you cooperate; it doesn't mean anything to me. And you make a really cogent point that, in the end, look, Sammy doesn't like me. We've all know that.
Right.
I think there is a thought that he is right in a way. Like, who the hell is this guy?
Right.
And I think we look at all the writers or authors or journalists. I mean, none of them were ever connected to the mob, right?
Jeff, I can look you in the eye right now and say to you, Jeff, do you unequivocally know how you would react if you were in that situation?
No, and that's why I,
No
in
one
turn,
does.
have a real issue with some of the people on YouTube that have this anti-informant thing, and it's like you're
Shut
sitting
up.
in a
Shut
you're sitting in a
up.
home in Kentucky somewhere, and you're
Yeah.
talking about this and that.
Yeah.
But when I was a kid, RJ and I had this conversation a lot. As you grew up, you kind of realize like these are all bad people in the end,
Right.
and it's like they're no less of a bad person because they cooperate or not. They're putting bad people away. It's not like these people are informing against innocent people and framing them for crimes and stuff. I could understand that. But again, these are bad people they're putting in prison. And most of America wants that. People don't want criminals on the street, right?
But they did whatever they did, the murders that they committed in general, I'm not
Sure.
saying 1,000%, were amongst themselves. They
Sure.
didn't go, it wasn't like the Colombians and the cartels today that
Mexican,
kill your dog and your mother and your aunt,
Sure.
It
Sure.
wasn't like that. They would never touch anybody in your family, never.
Yeah.
They'd walk away from the hit if there was, the wife there. They would never do that. Yeah, it did happen, but in general, that never happened. So what were they doing? They would,
Final question, and I mean this. Did you ever fear for your life?
yeah.
You did.
Yeah,
A lot.
sure. No, not a lot. No.
Why did you?
Well, when Bruce was killed, I
Around
was concerned because what did I know? What did he tell me? What information did he give me that he wasn't supposed to?
Sure.
Right? They didn't know.
Let's say Bruce kind of plays the game like everybody else because maybe he didn't for a meeting or two. What do you think he would have been in the union?
He would have been the president. Cody
think
would.
so?
Oh, definitely, unequivocally, without.
Do you think you may have after him? You
Oh,
would have been the president?
I don't know that, but I would. Listen, it was. I was groomed with him that I was going to be the outside source to open up these businesses because of the connections we had. We were, the deep mafia connections we had. We were, and the lawyer thing.
Yeah.
We were going places. Things with big things were ahead of us.
By the way, I'm getting a kick out of it. Every time I do an interview, the stupid lawn guy.
I got it going on now too.
No, I hear it in the background.
Yeah.
It's almost like choreographed, where I'll do a show and
Right.
they immediately get the leaf blower out and start.
No, it's amazing. It's amazing, isn't it?
But hey, we're lucky to have people that do it for us. I guess.
Yes.
There's nothing wrong with
Yes,
that. We have
yes.
bigger things to complain about. I guess.
Yes.
Joe Lanfranchi. This has been one of my favorite interviews I've done. I'm really happy that we
Really?
were able to. Yes.
Out of everybody that you've interviewed,
Yeah, when I've interviewed a lot, but
I know.
I think for me, like I like new stories, right?
Right.
Like I like new looks into the life we
Right.
didn't see.
Right.
We've all heard Sammy and Mikey
Yeah.
Franzini's. We've
Right.
heard all those guys.
Right.
So anytime we can get someone that hasn't been involved, and I find unions really interesting, just because, again, like they have so much control of literally everything,
Yes.
and they've done a lot for like the normal worker. It's
And Jeff,
kind of
there's
insane.
so many other interesting stories. Like Cody's girlfriend I told you about. I mean, we could go so many different places, and it's history.
Absolutely.
It's so important. It's history.
Yeah.
Who's going to be able to tell these? Look, how many guys are left like me? I'm
No, and that's-
73. There's nobody around.
And that's what I tell guys. So I talk to guys that have been around YouTube, right? And I try to sell to them like, you want to tell your story. Like you're one of the very few that have lived this, right?
Yeah.
And that's one thing about this genre that I am very saddened about is how many stories we didn't get,
Yes.
right? Just
Yes.
because of like you look at a guy, just one guy, like a Jackie D'Amico, Jackie knows.
Right.
Like the stories he had, it's almost a shame that we didn't have someone there like hearing
Right.
them,
Right.
You mentioned like the Tom DeBella,
Right.
it's insane. They're right in your grill now.
Yeah, they're walking away now.
I know.
Yeah.
Joe, this is great. I really appreciate you.
I'm so, you know what? I'm like, flabbergasted that you said I'm one of your favorite interviews.
No, you are.
Yeah, really,
I-
that's pretty cool.
Again, it's something that we just don't hear much about, and there were so many union people, but it's like rare to hear someone that was like as high as you were. It's just super interesting.
It's pretty cool. It's cool stuff,
Yeah.
And again, without these stories, I mean, this stuff would die, and it's such an important part of that era, the construction era in Manhattan.
So yeah, Joe, this was great. Like I said, I saw you on Michael's show. You've been very kind in my comments, and I really appreciate you coming on. It's been really enlightening. Maybe we'll get you back again. Maybe take some questions from some folks. I know there are a lot of union people in our chats and stuff
Right,
that maybe
right.
maybe they were drivers or
Right.
something. So maybe we'll get you back. And I hope to see you soon. I'm sure we'll cross paths or something, right?
Yeah, well, I always pop on your shows. I love your shows.
Thanks.
I love listening to the content. You got some great guests. And the chat is pretty interesting. I know you're going to change your the way you're
Yeah, I
doing
think,
things,
I
and that's
just think
okay.
it's sometimes it rubs people the wrong way, and I do think I've been, over the years, that's one of the kind of the knocks that I have. And look, as I get older, you want to be a little bit more
It's
kind of,
sad to say though, Jeff. People like that kind of
I
stuff.
know they do.
You
I know
know
they
that.
do.
You
But
know, being a
I think,
content creator, you know that they like
I
it.
think though, you have to start though dealing with individuals that you don't
Right.
necessarily
Right.
want to deal with.
Right.
And that's
Right.
kind of really more my issue.
Right.
But hey, listen, when you get to a certain level of what you're doing, this is a small genre,
Yeah.
and there's not a lot of really good people doing it. So I think
No.
people have certain feelings or whatever. So,
But you do a great job,
thanks.
and I know everybody appreciates what you do. It's not easy, it's thankless, and you're doing it basically for free.
Yeah, RJ and I talk about that a lot. Like, I
And
don't
for
think
people
people
to
understand.
comment, you're giving them content for free.
Right. And what goes into, like, I have I have dozens of these just filled with stuff. And
What
when
about
I
the
do
editing
it,
side? The editing side.
no, but here's the thing. I want to make this clear. I do not edit anything. When I
Okay.
do a video, I sit here and look at my camera and it's off the top of my head. I
Wow.
don't have any.
Wow.
I do it one take.
Right.
I don't edit
Right.
anything.
Gotcha.
So this interview I did with you will
Right.
be out today
Right.
at 3 p.m.
Right.
within an hour from now.
Right.
And the only reason I'm doing 3 o'clock is because I want people to, be there and
Yeah.
expect it.
Yeah.
But it's hard. It's not
Yeah.
easy. So
Yeah.
I thank you. Your salutations mean a lot to me. I really hope we can get you back, Joe. I'm glad
Yeah.
you're able to come on and tell some of your story. Thanks for doing it, man.
You're welcome, brother. Thank you for having me.
And Joe, you don't have to share anything. I know you don't have a channel or anything. Do you think maybe
No.
that's something you'll do someday?
Nah, I don't think so. I
You
don't
like
have
being
the
a, you just
yeah,
like
I
being
don't
a,
have the patience.
yeah.
It takes a lot, Jeff. You know that.
Oh yeah.
And to put up with all this, you're a liar and you're full of it, and And I'm gonna get. I know it's gonna happen. Happened to me with the other one.
But
You're
hey,
not making 100,000. He's full of baloney.
I've always said I could cure cancer tomorrow, and someone would bitch it wasn't done fast enough.
Right.
It's insane
Yeah.
how people will
Right.
like. You always find one. There's always one comment.
Right.
You suck, or you didn't.
Right.
That's wrong, and it's
Right.
well, it's not wrong, but okay. It's part of the game. So, Joe Lanfranchi, thank you for coming on. We'll talk to you soon. All right.
Jeff, they do. Thank you for having me.
No problem. And wait on. We'll talk after. Let me
Okay.
just end
Yeah,
this.
yeah.
Thanks everybody for watching. We'll see you next week here on the Sit Down.